One of the most important systems in Minecraft to make your equipment more powerful is the enchantment system. Using either an enchantment table, anvil, or some random garbage someone threw into a chest, you'll be able to make your tools stronger or even give them new abilities. Currently, there are 39 different enchantments in the game which can be applied to the several different tool types. With so many different enchantments though, some are bound to be worse than others. So today, I thought it'd be fun to rank all of the enchantments in the game from the worst to the best. And it certainly helps that this is one of my most requested rankings to date. Now how am I going to be ranking these? Well, for my last few Minecraft rankings, I've just sort of gone with which thing I like more as opposed to practicality. While I feel like that was the best way to go for those previous rankings, I definitely think this one should be based on how practical and useful the enchantment is. I'm also going to consider which enchantments don't work with others, as you can't stack every enchantment together on one thing. Finally, this is taken from a Java survival perspective. Some enchantments may be more useful in different game modes or in Bedrock Edition, so keep in mind that this is for Java survival. But anyways, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and let's jump right into the worst enchantment. One thing I thought would be fun for this video is to separate the enchantments into a tier list. Obviously I'm still going to order them as this is a number ranking, but I thought also throwing them into a tier list fit. We've got 7 tiers for this video, and this first one is made up of 3 enchantments that are pretty much completely worthless. So as the worst enchantment in the game, we have 39 Curse of Binding. Curse of Binding is a purely negative enchantment, hence the curse of the name. Essentially, if you put on a piece of equipment that has this enchantment, you will not be able to take it off until it's either broken or you die. Being stuck with no way to remove your armor is obviously pretty bad. It's especially bad when it comes to the chestplate and elytra, as you have to switch on and off which one you're wearing. Now luckily you can't get the curses from just enchanting in the table. You had to find equipment or books with the enchantment in structures or through villagers. That's not really much of a positive saying you can avoid the enchantment, but hey, it's there. So yeah, there's really no good reason for you to ever want this. Emphasis on the good. See, if you're playing in multiplayer, you can combine a pumpkin with Curse of Binding. Then you can get one of your friends to take off a helmet and activate a dispenser that equips the pumpkin. Now, not only is the pumpkin blocking their vision, but they can't take it off. Not without dying at least, because the pumpkin doesn't lose durability. But if you want to be even more evil, do this on a server with keep inventory turned on, and watch as this account is permanently trapped with the pumpkin head forever.
The jack-o'-lantern.
So, moral of the story? Don't play with keep inventory on, loser. 38. Curse of Vanishing. They'll also make it to where any item with this enchantment equipped will completely disappear when the player dies with it in their inventory. Obviously that's not something you want, but at the same time it's much less annoying than binding. If you just simply never die, or heck play in hardcore mode, this curse will literally have zero effect on anything. Also, I feel like I should mention that some people have actually found a decent use for it, believe it or not, but it's multiplayer exclusive. See, if you're on a server and for some reason get into a battle with another player often, you may not want to accidentally give them your gear upon death, so you can apply this curse to prevent your enemies from picking up your gear if you die. That's not really a use that would apply to most players at all, but I'm sure I would get comments about it if I didn't bring it up. Now besides the 2 curses, what other enchantment could possibly be in this tier? Well, there are quite a few lame enchantments coming up. There is only one that I believe is so terrible that it belongs in a tier below the rest. In fact, I could legitimately see an argument that it's worse than Curse of Vanishing. That enchantment is 37 Fire Protection. Now on the super surface level, this seems pretty good. This will reduce damage taken by fire and burning. Seems pretty decent, right? Until you realize you can't combine this and normal protection together. Protection reduces all normal damage sources in the game, including fire. Now yes, Fire Protection 4 is slightly better at stopping you from burning to death than Protection 4, but think about it. You are giving up protection against literally everything else in the game to last for 25 extra seconds in lava. Protection 4 already lets you last for about 36 seconds if you don't eat anything. Literally just get out of the lava. Oh, and you want to know the best part? Unlike the other protection enchantments, which spoiler are still quite mediocre, you could just make a fire resistance potion to completely negate any fire damage. That way you can keep Protection 4 and survive for however long you want to swimming in lava. There is literally no reason to ever want this enchantment. I'm serious, if you can come up with a good reason, let me know in the comments. The reason this is a whole tier below the others is because for them, I could come up with something, but for this, there's just nothing. Oh, and as for the argument of Vanishing being better, well, since Curse of Vanishing doesn't prevent you from getting any other enchantments, while Fire Protection locks you out of normal protection, you could legitimately make the case that Fire Protection has a bigger downside than Curse of Vanishing. There's just so much wrong with this enchantment that it definitely deserves to be in this F tier. I would be shocked if anyone likes this enchantment. But now it's time to go through enchantments that I still find to be quite bad, but if you squint hard enough, they do have a use. Starting us off, we have 36 Bane of Arthropods. This is pretty much the bad enchantment. Everyone always calls it terrible, and it's for good reason. Essentially, it lets you do extra damage to 5 different mobs: spiders, cave spiders, silverfish, endermite, and bees. Just like Fire Protection though, this is bad because you can't put it on a sword with sharpness, which deals extra damage to every mob. Now to be fair, Bane of Arthropods 5 does deal more damage to the mobs it affects than Sharpness 5, but let's throw an asterisk on that. See, of those 5 mobs, 3 of them have health that is so low that a sharpness 5 sword will already kill them in 1 hit. So unless you're fighting a bee that somehow discovered how to make a resistance potion, Bane of Arthropods will literally change nothing about these 3 mobs. That leaves us with just the cave spider and normal spider, and even then, the cave spider dies to 1 critical hit from a sharpness 5 sword. But while it does suck completely, like I said, there is a use for it. If you can afford to make a second sword and have a spider spawner farm, a Bane of Arthropods sword can slightly help kill the spiders faster. Yeah, I'm not kidding when I said you needed to squint for these, but it's something more than I can give fire protection. Also, I guess it can help if you really suck at fighting spiders. 35. Projectile protection. This will reduce damage taken by projectiles, but just like fire protection, it locks you out of normal protection. The reason this gets a place higher is because A, projectiles are much more common, and B, I think it's a bit more acceptable early game. If you enchant some random iron armor piece and get projectile protection, sure it's kind of disappointing to not get the normal one, but it can hold you over until you start to get some real gear. I don't really have much to say on this one. If you get sniped by skeletons constantly, it can be nice, but otherwise, get protection. 34. Blast protection. This is our final enchantment that locks us out of default protection. Dude, I'm so tired of saying protection. This will be able to reduce damage given to the player from explosions. While yes, explosions are a bit less common than projectiles, explosions are significantly more deadly. A good way to show this off is the fact that a point-blank bed explosion in the nether is enough to kill you on hard mode even with protection 4, whereas you can survive the blast with a few hearts while wearing blast protection. Overall, it's still definitely a worse protection, but in some very niche scenarios, I could see it somewhat being useful. 33. Riptide. This is our final D tier enchantment. What it does is allow the player to go flying with the trident while they throw it. That seems like a pretty cool gimmick, and in all honesty it is. There are, however, 2 things holding it back. For one, it only works when you're in water. You're not even able to throw it outside of it. Yeah, that's really annoying. I don't think they needed to put that limitation on it. What makes it worse is the fact that this can't be on a trident with either loyalty or channeling, the 2 most important enchantments for the item. There's still some uses for this regardless, like it could be somewhat fun to fight with underwater, and the ability can also work while it's raining. You still take fall damage. The best realistic use I can think of is getting an elytra boost in the rain without using any rockets. You go pretty fast with it too, so it's a lot of fun to use a Riptide enchantment to fly around. This is definitely the best of this tier, but it's still hard to call it good with so many limitations. Onto our C tier, and this is where the enchantments start to get pretty decent. The ones in this tier either have no downsides and just a whatever use, or a minimal downside for a solid use. 32. Frostwalker. This is one of the game's treasure enchantments, meaning the only way to get it is from a structure, villager, or fishing. It's exclusive to boots and will allow anyone using it to walk on water by turning it into frosted ice. This special kind of ice will go away after a while, and the size of the ice circle around you depends on the level of the enchantment. One other cool thing you can do is put these boots on an armor stand, as it will actually still work even if it's not being used by a player. While this all sounds nice, it does sadly clash with another enchantment, Depth Strider, which I find to be much better for water travel. But hold on just a second now, this also makes it to where you can walk on magma blocks while taking 0 damage.
How do they make this more and more epic?
The reason I put it up in this tier is because of the armor stand stuff, as I have seen some pretty neat things done with it. You can make some bridges across water, which can be helpful in some scenarios, but it also doesn't let you sprint jump with it, so it's really annoying to actually use. 31. Knockback. This might just be the single most controversial enchantment. Essentially what it does is make your attack send the mob or person receiving it much further away. Now there are decent reasons on both sides to either like or hate this enchantment, but in my opinion, it kinda sucks. Most of the time when you're killing something, you're going to want to pick up what it drops, and knockback can make it much more annoying to do. It's especially bad if you're fighting on any sort of high up place and you send your target flying off. Now with that said, there are some reasons to like this. If you are simply fighting to survive an attack, knocking your opponent away to give you a chance to escape can be very helpful. Then again, if it's something like a skeleton or blaze, knockback can give them an easier chance to hit you with their projectiles. Generally, I try to avoid having knockback if I can, but at the same time, I usually don't care that much if I get it. Really, I think the best place for knockback are in PvP modes like Skywars to knock people off into the void, but since this is based on survival mode, I think knockback is pretty weak. In a similar vein, we have 30. Punch. This does exactly the same thing as knockback, but it applies to bows instead. The reason I find this to be better is because if you're using your bow, it's usually because the mob is already far enough away, so the punch will have a less detrimental effect. Plus, hitting yourself with punch arrows is mildly entertaining, so yeah, I think the bow version is a smidge better. 29. Piercing. Okay, to be totally honest with you all, I never use crossbows. I'm sure the crossbow fandom is up in flames right now, but my point is that I'm going to be a fairly bad judge of where its enchantments belong. This will have your arrows shoot through up to 5 different mobs. I'm just not very sure what scenario this could be that helpful in. The advancement where you have to kill 5 different mobs with an arrow is cool, but besides that, I can't really think of much reason to get excited for this. Also, I guess it could sort of work like an infinity enchantment for crossbows since you can pick up arrows afterwards. It's just kind of tedious. 28. Multi-shot. Multi-shot will simply shoot out 3 arrows instead of 1. I just think this effect is a bit too specific. Like, yeah, if you got 3 zombies coming towards you and are all perfectly spaced apart, then this can be somewhat helpful, but it's mostly just a whatever enchantment. It doesn't hurt too much to get though, since it can only lock you out of piercing, so I'd still recommend getting it if you can. Okay, after writing this segment, I started messing messing around with this in fireworks, and it was actually quite a lot of fun. But every shot uses 9 durability. Yeah, apparently multi-shot always uses 3 durability, and using a firework uses 3 as well, so combined it does 9. Whatever, multi-shot is weird. 27, Thorns. This is another enchantment like knockback that I've seen opinions dwindle on over the years. Essentially, it'll turn the player into a cactus, so if anything hits them while they have thorns on their armor, the attacker will take some self-damage. This damage is really small though, and it also comes with the downside of using up durability for every thorns attack. Now granted, durability is a much less important problem now with mending existing, but it's still kind of a dumb downside to throw on. I don't actively avoid or try to get thorns now. If I get it, I get it, and if I don't, I won't really care. 26, Sweeping Edge. This is a Java exclusive enchantment for swords, which will let the little wind thing that comes out of your sword do a bit more damage to surrounding mobs. This is just kind of mildly helpful while killing mobs in either a farm or a large group. Like thorns, it doesn't really do that much, so I've never been super thankful to have this. It doesn't have any downsides though, so it gets the edge. The Sweeping Edge. Thank you, yes, I know I'm hilarious. Alright, time for B tier. 25, Quick Charge. This lets you charge the shot for a crossbow quicker. I mean, that's pretty cool. Too bad I don't care about crossbows. 24, Impaling. This will deal extra damage to any water-based mob, which includes axolotls, dolphins, guardians, elder guardians, squid, glow squid, turtles, all fish types, and drown. What? Alright, so I guess it could deal extra damage to 11 mobs. But if we look at it like we did with Bane of Arthropods again, the 4 fish die in one hit without any enchantments, and the dolphin, squid, and glow squid die in one hit to sharpness 5, so really it's only effective on 4 mobs. These are much less common than spiders though, so why is this so much higher? Well, it's because of the tool this is for. This can only be applied to tridents, which can't have sharpness anyway, so it doesn't conflict with anything. If you have a trident, you might as well just try and get this. It can be somewhat helpful when raiding ocean monuments, though not really at any other point. At least for now. This is actually the enchantment I think is the most different between Java and Bedrock, because on Bedrock, this is significantly better. It doesn't just deal damage to aquatic mobs, but any mob that's in water, including while it's raining. That is much less situational, and I think is a good way of making the weather system in Minecraft a bit more interesting. Players could then get excited for rain as they have a chance to use their tridents much more effectively. From what I've heard, this functionality will be coming to Java someday too, which will greatly boost impaling on the rankings if it does, but as of 1.20, I think this is where it belongs. 23, Fire Aspect. Now for some of you, this may be a bit low, so let me explain. This can be applied to swords so that your attacks can light anything hit by it on fire. This can obviously be helpful as the fire will deal occasional damage to the other mob, which makes it die a bit quicker. This also has the benefit of cooking any food the mob would have dropped without the need of a furnace. In my opinion, that's really this enchantment's best use, as it can save quite a bit of time smelting. Once you get to a point in the game where you have access to easy golden carrots though, this enchantment's usefulness takes a bit of a nosedive. The fire doesn't really do that much damage, and you could probably hit the mob enough times to kill it before the fire really has any sort of effect. What really hurts this though are endermen, as if they get set on fire, they'll constantly teleport like crazy as they take damage, making it a pain to fight them. I'd say it's still overall pretty solid, just not one of the best since it does have some downsides. 22, Flame. This is the exact same thing but for bows. It can also save you some extra arrows, as the burn may be able to finish off a mob that would normally require a second arrow. 21, Lure. This will make fishing faster as the fish in the water will be attracted to your rod more. This is pretty essential if you ever want to go fishing, as it makes the process much more efficient. Same goes with 20, Luck of the Sea. This will improve your odds of getting a treasure item from fishing. Those treasure items are enchanted bows, enchanted fishing rods, name tags, saddles, nautilus shells, and most importantly, enchantment books. That's a pretty decent selection of items, but if you saw my video on Minecraft items that became useless, you know that I think fishing is a bit on the pointless side these days. I still quite enjoy doing it though, and you can absolutely still get stuff from it, so I think these enchantments still deserve to be here. 19, Swift Sneak. This can be applied to leggings and will increase the sneaking speed of anyone wearing it. At level 3, it'll be able to match normal walking speeds. Now that sounds pretty cool, and I was gonna place it up higher, but then I thought about it, and you could just let go of the shift button. Yeah, it's helpful in ancient cities, I guess, which is also the only place where you can get this enchantment, but outside of that, I don't think this would help do much. It's definitely not bad, and I'd rather have it than not have it, it's just that its use isn't as important as some of what we have coming up. 18, Smite. This will deal extra damage to undead mobs, which is our biggest list of these mob-specific extra damage enchantments. The mobs that are affected by Smite are the zombie, skeleton, zombie villager, wither skeleton, zombified piglin, skeleton horse, stray, husk, Phantom, Drowned, and Zoglin. And also the zombie horse, I guess, but they're not really. Right away, that list is better than the others we've seen, because not only is it bigger, but these mobs are also more common and generally have more health. Having a boss that takes extra damage from the enchantment in the form of the Wither is also a pretty big deal, though he is still pretty easy in the Java edition, even with just sharpness. Of course, we still have to consider the downside that Smite can't be combined with sharpness, but there is one small solution here. While you can only get Smite in the enchantment table while using a sword, an axe still can have the Smite enchantment applied to it with the anvil. So you can have a sharpness sword and a Smite axe axe to deal with the game's different mobs. So while I'm sure some people would place this quite low, I think being able to put this on an axe saves it. A critical hit from a Smite 5 netherite axe can one-hit kill mobs like zombified piglin, which is good as if the piglin dies to one strike, it won't anger the others around it. You definitely don't need smites, but it's a good one to have. 17. Channeling. To me, this enchantment is the reason tridents are worth collecting at all. I've mentioned in the past how annoying the grind is to get one, so without this, I probably wouldn't even bother. But what does it do? Well, if it's thundering, this will make any mob you hit with a thrown trident get struck by lightning. Now at first, this may just seem like a cool aesthetic way to deal more damage, but there is a bit more to lightning than what's on the surface. See, there are 5 mobs that have special reactions to getting struck by lightning. Pigs will turn into zombified piglin, villagers will turn into a witch, mushrooms will turn brown, turtles will sometimes drop bowls, but most importantly, creepers will become charge creepers. These are more powerful versions of the mob that deal a bigger and more deadly explosion. However, if it manages to kill either a zombie, skeleton, creeper, or piglin, it'll drop its head. This is the only way to get these heads, besides the skeleton in ancient cities. And they're some of my favorite decorative blocks in the entire game. Before this enchantment, getting these was a massive pain, especially considering we didn't even have lightning rods. So I'm always super grateful for this enchantment's addition. Obviously, it's not as practical as some others as it's still quite specific, but I like it a lot so it's placing fairly high. Oh, also it works on lightning rods, so if you want, you can make a machine like this. A tier time. These enchantments are in my opinion near essentials. Except for the first one because I had no clue where to put it. 16. Infinity. This was by far the hardest enchantment to place on the entire list. If I had made this video a few years ago, this would have easily been S tier, but now it's kind of confusing to judge. You can put this on a bow and it'll make you have infinite ammo as long as you have 1 arrow in your inventory. Yeah, so that's obviously really good. So why is it lower than it would have been? Well, this is the only enchantment in the entire game to not be able to combine with the mending enchantment. This is a huge detriment, as not having mending makes any tool significantly more vulnerable to breaking. So I'm stuck. I could definitely see an argument to put this up higher despite the mending problem as it saves collecting arrows, but at the same time, is just collecting arrows even that difficult? Making a skeleton farm, especially if you have a spawner, will easily get you more arrows than you could ever need. So really the debate is, do you want an unbreakable bow that requires some arrow farming, or do you want a bow that will eventually break but you don't need to collect arrows? Generally, I stick with a mending bow, which is why I put infinity this low. If you put it up higher on your own list, I totally get it, but for me, I think the beginning of A tier is the best spot. 15. Soul Speed. This will increase movement speed on soul sand and soul soil. While this may seem a bit too specific to be helpful, the speed increase is actually incredibly good. You go much faster with this enchantment on soul soil than you would running on land normally. That's also why this is so much higher than Swift Sneak, as this actually gives the player a faster way to travel instead of just making their slowest movement speed match their default speed. This is also pretty essential in traversing a soul sand valley. In fact, I'd say this enchantment makes the biome so fun that it's one of my favorites in the game. Now there are some downsides which are important to mention. First off, the obvious, it only does stuff on soul sand or soul soil, which means if you want to use this to travel somewhere, you'll need to set up a soul soil path first. That doesn't take too long though, so it's not that big of a deal. What kind of is though, is the fact that every few blocks of soul soil you walk on, the boots lose some durability. I really don't think this was necessary, and while the loss rate isn't terrible if you have them breaking 3, it's still kind of important to keep in the back of your mind. I would still say the positives outweigh the negatives though, so I quite like this. Getting the enchantment is annoying because you have to get lucky with the piglins and they suck, I hate them. 14. Aqua Affinity. This one is nice and simple. It makes the player mine faster underwater. More specifically, being underwater will normally make mining take 5 times as long, but Aqua Affinity completely ignores that. This is helpful in a ton of scenarios like gathering blocks from ocean monuments, raiding ocean ruins, just collecting any block from underwater, and so on. I think this is a pretty essential enchantment for any underwater activity. Speaking of, 13. Respiration. This will also allow you to breathe underwater for significantly longer. But yeah, this is helpful in all scenarios Aqua Affinity is, and even more on top of that since it helps you if you just want to travel underwater as well. But for our final water enchantment, we have 12. Depth Strider. This can be applied to boots and will increase movement speed in water. Every time I start a new world, I forget just how slow water movement is without this enchantment. It is incredibly useful for speeding up travel pretty much anywhere. You're bound to run into a lake or ocean every now and then in the overworld, so Depth Strider can make crossing them much less painful. Oh yeah, and one last fun thing. If you combine this with the Soul Speed and Dolphin's Grace effect, you can travel at the speed of light. Obviously the setup is quite difficult since you need to have dolphins, but this is really cool. 11. Loyalty. This is definitely the best trident enchantment, as I think it's basically essential if you ever want to use the item. Basically, this makes it to where the trident will come back to you after you throw it, which is incredibly helpful as you really don't want to lose your trident after working so hard to get it. This is even able to phase through blocks as well, so you can get as silly as you want throwing this around anywhere. Alright, I guess it doesn't come back if it goes in the void. But yeah, this being as helpful as it is makes Riptide suck all the more since they can't be combined. I really think you need to have loyalty if you plan on using a trident. But now we have our top 10 for the S tier, what I think are the best of the best. If you're enchanting stuff and don't have these 10 yet, you're not done, get back to work. You have 24 hours. 10, Feather Falling. This is exclusive to boots and will reduce fall damage, and if you like to get a bit silly like me, you'll need it a lot for when you inevitably jump down a massive hole for the funsies. It's also worth noting that unlike the other protection enchantments, this can combine with normal protection, which is what makes it as good as it is. Also, I'm just gonna say right now that the explanations for these top 10 enchantments will likely be quite short since they're all up here for fairly obvious reasons. 9, Looting. This will not only increase the amount of items mobs drop when killed, but it will also increase the chance of getting a rare drop from the mob. This is most notably important when getting Wither Skeleton Skulls, as it boosts the chance per kill from 2.5% to 5.5%, which is a significant boost. It's not just them though, as getting rare drops and more plentiful drops is good for pretty much every mob. Looting is very powerful. 8, Fortune. This is very similar to looting, but it goes on tools instead and will make most commonly ores drop more resources when mined. Diamonds, for example, go from just dropping 1 per block to up to 4 per block. Also, love how my luck is so terrible that someone in the comments thought I didn't have Fortune since I got 1 diamond from literally every ore. Very cool game. I'm sure you all can tell that getting more resources from ores is pretty dang helpful. However, this does actually have a pretty significant downside that makes me not want to place it higher than this. First off, it can't combine with Silk Touch, but that makes sense because they do entirely different things, so I'm not docking points for it. No, the downside I'm talking about has to do with shovels. See, if you watch my wording carefully, I said it was mostly ores that are affected, but there are a few other blocks. One of those just so happens to be gravel, where a fortune shovel will increase the chance of it to drop flint. Flint is only helpful when crafting flint and steel and arrows, which are not really recipes I think others use that often, at least often enough to want a large supply of flint. Gravel on the other hand is very useful as it's one of the main components in concrete, which is one of my favorite building blocks. Having a fortune shovel makes collecting large amount of gravel much more difficult than it would be without it, so in all honesty, I would rather take an unenchanted shovel over a Fortune 3 shovel, especially since Fortune 3 guarantees the flint drop every time. So since Fortune can legitimately be quite detrimental on one of the game's main tools, I decided to keep it kinda low on the top 10. I still like it more than looting since having more ores is generally better than having more mob drops most of the time, but the shovel thing definitely hurts. 7, Power, and 6, Sharpness. This will make your weapons do more damage to anything it hits, with power being for bows and sharpness being for swords. It's very simple, but also very obviously important. It saves a ton of time attacking stuff and are basically the essential weapon enchantments. 5, Silk Touch. This might be a bit of a weird choice to put above those two, but I think Silk Touch just barely edges them out for me. This allows you to pick up pretty much any block the way it was when you mined it. If you're still confused what I mean, certain blocks like stone will turn into another block when mined, in this case being cobblestone. If you have Silk Touch though, you'll just get stone when you mine it instead, which is very helpful as stone is used in a ton of crafting recipes. You know what, let's just go over all the block Silk Touch effects. All of the ores, snow layers, snow blocks, amethyst buds and clusters, coral blocks, deep slate, ender chest, gilded blackstone, nylium, warp nylium, stone, bee nest, beehive, ice, packed ice, blue ice, bookshelves, chiseled bookshelves, clay, decorated pots, glass panes, glowstone, grass blocks, mycelium, podzol, gravel, leaves, melons, mushroom blocks, all the skulk blocks, sea lanterns, campfires, soul campfires, turtle eggs, twisting vines, and weeping vines. That is a large selection of blocks, so Silk Touch is incredibly helpful. This lets you do so many things, like saving time with getting stone, always getting gravel without the risk of flint, being able to carry an ender chest with you to greatly expand your inventory space, and so on. I guess you could argue that sometimes it's bad to have Silk Touch, as sometimes stuff like Deep Slate is worse than its normal drop, but a majority of the time, this is so useful that it far outweighs its weaknesses. I always put it on my shovel and make a second Silk Touch pickaxe. It's an incredibly useful enchantment. 4, Protection. This reduces damage from all normal sources besides magic and falling. Obviously, having more defense on all your armor is pretty dang useful. I think it's better than having more attack strength, as defense stops you from dying, and Protection 4 does a really good job of that. Unless you fall in the void, I find it very difficult to actually die once you obtain Protection 4 netherite gear, so I always make it my priority. 3, Efficiency. This makes you mine quicker, and seeing as you almost always have to be mining in this game, I think it's pretty clear it deserves to be up here. This enchantment more than any other can save hundreds, if not thousands of hours. Mining is essential in getting resources and building pretty much anything, so if you want to try and take on big projects, you have to have efficiency. It also doesn't conflict with any enchantments at all, so there's zero excuse not to get it. Safe to say, this is easily one of the best enchantments in the game. Despite that though, the top 2 are so good that I think they deserve their own S+ tier. I struggled a lot with the exact placings of every other enchantment in this video, but these 2 were locked in as numbers 1 and 2 from the very start. 2, Unbreaking. At level 3, this multiplies the durability of any tool by 3 times. And I mean any tool, as one thing that sets these 2 enchantments apart is the fact that they can go onto literally any tool with durability. Weapons, armor, tools, elytra, and so on can all get this and benefit greatly from it. Obviously, if you're spending so much time enchanting your stuff, you're gonna want to have it for as long as possible, so Unbreaking 3 stops it from breaking so soon. But if you just have Unbreaking 3, it will break eventually. Even if you go repair it in the anvil, it will eventually get too expensive. That's where our easily #1 enchantment comes in. I'm sure everyone guessed it, it's Mending. This will automatically repair any tool's durability when the player picks up XP. The amount it repairs is based on the amount of XP collected, and it can only do so when the item is being held or worn. This is stupid powerful because you can just go to an XP farm for a few minutes whenever your tools get low, and you'll be back like nothing happened. There's no mending limit, so this enchantment basically gives your tools immortality. Heck, stuff like swords, armor, and fishing rods will basically never break because killing mobs and fishing stuff up gives you XP. So as you use the tool, you collect more XP than what's required to repair it. I don't think there is any way mending could not be #1. It makes the game so much more convenient to play. Sure, it is a treasure enchantment, so it can be somewhat tedious to get it from a villager, but if there's any enchantment that deserves that status, it's mending. So for making Minecraft so much more convenient to play, mending is by far the best enchantment in the entire game. But anyways, that's it for this video. Do you think Luck of the Sea sucks because it makes it harder to get lily pads from fishing? Let me know in the comments. This is one of my favorite videos I've ever got to make. I knew I'd enjoy it, but I was not expecting to have so much to say on all of these enchantments. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video as well. I also plan on doing a structure and biome ranking in the future, but if you have any other ranking ideas, feel free to let me know in the comments. But anyway, Mario. But anyways, dry bones for Smash, and I'll see you guys next time.